2 people, different cities, same morning. A subcontractor who laid drainage pipes on a Carillion site in the Midlands showed up that Monday to find the gates locked and a printed notice taped to the fence. He was owed £40,000. He never saw a penny of it. A facilities worker at the Midland Metropolitan Hospital site, half-built, concrete exposed, wiring still hanging from ceilings, arrived to find no site manager, no instructions, and no answer on the phone. Neither knew the other existed, but both described the same thing the moment they realized the company had already stopped existing, even though nobody had told them yet. On the 15th of January 2018, Carillion PAC entered compulsory liquidation. It employed 43,000 people. It held over 450 public contracts. It had £29 million in cash against nearly £7 billion in liabilities. The question this film asks is not how a company gets into that position. It's how a company that, deep inside the British state, simply ceases to exist, and why not one person faced criminal charges for it. Carillion wasn't an accident, it was a design choice. It was created in July 1999 when the construction arm of Tarmac was spun off into a separate company. The timing was not coincidental. The British government had spent the previous decade building a framework called the Private Finance Initiative that was about to generate an enormous amount of work for exactly this kind of company. The Private Finance Initiative works like this. Instead of borrowing to build a hospital directly, the government contracts a private firm to finance, build and run that facility for 25 or 30 years and then makes annual payments across the whole contract period. The attraction for the Treasury is simple. The capital cost does not show up as public debt today. It appears as a future obligation spread thin enough across decades that it barely registers on the balance sheet. By the mid-2000s, public sector contracts made up 33% of Carillion's total revenue and 45% of its UK revenue. The company had become structurally dependent on government work, and the government had become structurally dependent on Carillion. 3 projects show you exactly what that dependence looked like on the ground. The Midland Metropolitan Hospital in Sandwell was supposed to open in 2019. When Carillion collapsed, the site stopped. What remained was a concrete shell, a building that looked finished from the road but had no functioning heating, no lighting systems, no operational wards. Patients were diverted to facilities not built to carry that volume for years. The hospital finally opened in October 2024. 6 years late, the Carillion-Amy joint venture held the contract to maintain around 50,000 homes for Ministry of Defence personnel and their families. Soldiers' families reported broken boilers unrepaired for months, mould on walls, and maintenance requests that disappeared into a call centre. Carillion billed the government for every year of that contract. The government paid. Then there is HS2. On the 10th of July 2017, Carillion issued its first profit warning, an £845 million impairment that wiped 70% off its share price in 2 days. 1 week later, the government awarded Carillion 2 HS2 construction contracts worth £1.4 billion. The minister responsible was Transport Secretary Chris Grayling. He faced calls to resign. He did not. The business model underneath all of this was broken from the start. Carillion bid below the true cost of projects to win them, accepted fixed-price contracts that left it absorbing every overrun, and used 120-day payment delays to subcontractors as a hidden line of credit, essentially funding its own operations with money owed to smaller firms. But a broken business model can survive for a long time if the numbers never show it. And Carillion had people whose job, year after year, was to make sure the numbers never did. Richard Adam was Carillion's finance director from 2007 until he left in September 2017. He signed off on the accounts for 2014, 2015 and 2016. Those accounts showed consistent profits, a rising dividend, and a company in reasonable health. None of that bore any meaningful relation to what was happening on the ground. Construction companies book revenue progressively as a percentage of completion. So if you estimate your profit margin on a contract at 10%, you book revenue on that basis as the build progresses. If costs spiral or structural problems emerge, you are supposed to revise that estimate downward. Carillion did the opposite. Take the Royal Liverpool University Hospital. In 2015, asbestos was found on site. Carillion revised its estimated profit margin upward to 5.5%. In 2016, inspectors found cracks in structural support beams. Fixing them was estimated internally at £20 million. The project's true margin was a loss of 12.7%. Senior management revised it down by just £1.5 million and kept the contract in profit on paper. This was not a rounding error. It was the pattern across dozens of contracts described by the Parliamentary Select Committee as presenting accounts in defiance of internal controls. Alongside inflated revenue recognition, there was a second mechanism. Carillion ran what it called an early payment facility, a supply chain finance arrangement that let it borrow money against future revenue. Those borrowings were not classified as debt. They sat on the balance sheet as trade payables, a completely different column excluded from the debt ratios that shareholders and lenders used to assess the company's health. Between the inflated revenue and the hidden borrowings, Carillion reported profits every single year. It increased its dividend every single year. In 2017, Chief Executive Richard Howson received over £1.5 million in non-stock compensation. That money came from a company that on any honest reading of its books was already insolvent. Someone was supposed to catch this. For 19 years, that someone was KPMG. KPMG audited Carillion from the late 1990s onwards, collecting £29 million in fees. In that time, they never once issued a qualified audit opinion, the formal signal that something in the accounts could not be verified. The Financial Reporting Council's own investigation, concluded in October 2023, found that KPMG failed to test contracts adequately, failed to challenge management's margin estimates, backdated working papers to cover gaps in their own process, and applied no meaningful professional skepticism about whether Carillion was even a going concern. The Financial Reporting Council fined KPMG £21 million, the largest audit fine in British history at the time. KPMG's formal response was that responsibility for Carillion's failure lay solely with its board and management. Now look at what happened between July and January. On the 10th of July 2017, an impairment of £845 million was announced. The share price fell 70% in 2 days. 1 week later, £1.4 billion in HS2 contracts were awarded. By September, total losses had spiraled to £1.15 billion. By November, the company had breached its banking covenants. In December, Chairman Philip Green wrote to the government requesting £160 million in emergency support. Government officials described the letter internally as a ransom note. The government refused. On the 15th of January 2018, with £29 million in cash and £7 billion in obligations, Carillion filed for compulsory liquidation. Their own Crown representative monitoring system had rated Carillion amber, a formal performance concern, since February 2016. In November 2017, officials recommended upgrading that to black, the highest risk category. Carillion executives lobbied against it. The rating was not changed. The company was gone. The question of who would answer for it was only just beginning. The morning after the liquidation was announced, 43,000 people woke up with no employer, over 3,000 direct redundancies, 27,000 pension scheme members transferred to the Pension Protection Fund, which by law pays reduced benefits, not what they were promised, not what they had planned around. 30,000 subcontractors owed approximately £2 billion between them, most of whom recovered virtually nothing. In the first quarter of 2018 alone, 780 UK construction firms entered insolvency, a 20% spike on the year before, traced directly to Carillion's collapse. Oxfordshire County Council spent over £13 million after 2018, fixing defects in structures the company had already been paid to complete correctly. The Midland Metropolitan Hospital opened in October 2024. The Royal Liverpool University Hospital opened in October 2022. Patients in both cities spent years being treated in facilities running well beyond their designed capacity because the buildings meant to replace them sat unfinished or structurally compromised. Parliament was not quiet. The joint report from the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee and the Work and Pensions Committee, published in May 2018, called the collapse a story of recklessness and greed. It named the board as responsible and culpable. It described KPMG and Deloitte as a cozy club that had provided false assurance to investors, workers and the public. The Financial Reporting Council and the pensions regulator were branded chronically passive. These were regulators that had seen the warning signs and chosen repeatedly not to act. Richard Adam received a 12.5-year ban from acting as a company director. Zafar Khan received 11 years. Richard Howson received 8 years. The case against Chairman Philip Green and 3 non-executive directors was dropped in October 2023. The Insolvency Service concluded it was not in the public interest to pursue them. The Financial Conduct Authority fined Howson, Adam and Khan for misleading investors. All 3 appealed, then withdrew those appeals in early 2026 and accepted reduced fines, Howson settling at £237,000, Adam at £232,000, Khan at £138,000. No criminal charges were ever brought against anyone connected to Carillion's collapse. The Private Finance Initiative, or PFI, was formally ended by Chancellor Philip Hammond in October 2018. But the 700+ existing schemes are still running, still being paid for. The total servicing cost across their lifetimes is estimated at approximately £200 billion. The 2019 outsourcing playbook introduced new procurement rules. By 2020, the Institute for Government found that many government departments had simply ignored them. In 2024, construction firm ISG Limited collapsed, and commentators reached immediately for the same comparisons. The structural conditions that built Carillion, lowest price procurement, dependency on a handful of large contractors, auditors whose fees depend on the firms they scrutinize, those conditions remain. The Select Committee put it plainly. The mystery is not that Carillion collapsed, it is that it lasted so long. Billions gone, tens of thousands of livelihoods destroyed, hospitals delayed by years. And the men who signed the accounts walk away with director bans and reduced fines, keeping every bonus they collected along the way. That is not a corporate failure. That is a system protecting itself. If you want to understand how Britain's public institutions actually work and who they work for, subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who still thinks what happened to Carillion was an accident.